So we're saving money.
I think it will be.
Turn everything down, a couple degrees.
I think this will be pretty quickly.
You can talk about the alleyways.
Yeah, I can talk about it. It's,
5:31 and you are live.
Thank you. Good evening, it is Tuesday, November 22nd. We're at the Town Council Economic Development Committee meeting. Councilmember Katie Lepari-Shu is excused. Councilmember Emily Falco.
I'm here.
Do you have any corrections to the minutes?
I did not.
Okay. Do you have any update on the alleyways?
So not so much, not too much since the last time we met.
Okay.
You know, there's, you know, an OCI grant in place, you know, between the three buildings on that one, alleyway
Mhm.
off of Deed Street. And then Ed May is going to also put up lights. So there's going to be string lights put up soon. When that happens, I'm not sure yet. I'm just waiting to hear back from the electrician.
Okay.
But then, you know, as far as like moving it forward, I think like the next thing that needs to happen is maybe some kind of like, it'd be great if maybe there was some kind of engagement between those businesses back there, maybe, and maybe find to maybe have some kind of, what am I trying to say, sorry, some kind of like
Synergy.
big, like one big area where everyone can bring their trash, right?
Okay.
To get the trash out of the alleyway, you know, and get all those dumpsters out of there, and then you kind of, then it would open up and it would make it a more inviting, well, you wouldn't have all the trash back there, like oil being dumped and things like that. So,
So are you working with, or in concert with the other building owners on your side?
I am, yeah.
And is that what you guys are moving with? Because I think Chip offered to put a screening in for trash as a central collection.
I was never part of that conversation. I mean, but I don't know what the best way to go about it. Is it something that maybe the city isn't involved in? Is it something that the city would have to help facilitate? Or,
All private property.
Yeah, that's all private property and the dumpsters don't belong to the city.
right,
That
so,
would just be coordinated amongst the business owners.
I mean, I think like as far as alleyway improvements go, as far as city involvement, it just seems like right now it's just gonna be kind of like collaboration between
Property owners.
property owners and, you know, until, you know, there's some kind of grant funding opportunity, like you were talking about for creating, rear facades.
So just to explain that would be a New York Main Street grant, and that would be for the rear facades, so that the building owners would have to be very, very interested and involved in the planning process and the grant process, and then they'd have to commit to actually applying for it once we get the grant. It'd be done much like the DRI, Downtown Improvement Fund, where we would then grant those building owners the funds if we get the grant. That's the main portion of the grant, but they also have a $15,000 amount that you can apply for, that we would try to use that for alleyway improvements like plantings, seeding, things like that. But it would not be anything more than that for, you know, taking on the right of way, taking on the alleys, paving or anything like that. Very small amount for the alleys themselves. We could do lighting, things like that.
Could we use that towards artwork?
We could use it for anything that benefits, or anything that's connected to the housing, because New York Main Street programs, their priority is housing. So that would be like the $15,000 you could use to improve the access up to the housing units on the upper floors from the back. That's how we would tie it in. So, you know, if that's seeding, plantings, things like that, then that's fine.
Right.
But you really can't go much beyond that, and it's only $15,000, which isn't a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know really where to take it from here, you know?
So also, I was asked to get a quote from company that offers what would look like a picture frame, so you could get it to a 4 foot by 8 foot or whatever size you want. But you could have multiple locations in those two alleyways of artwork for local artists. What's kind of nice about this system is that they're not gonna be out in the weather painting it, and the artwork could be approved in its final format, be printed, put on the vinyl, and then rotated on the different locations.
Mm-hmm, yeah, yeah.
It's a system that I've been using for several years now. I think they were like, it was $1,000 for a 4 by 8, I think it was a 4 by 8 system, so it would have metal picture frame, behind that are the springs, and then you basically hang the vinyl on the springs. So,
Yeah, Mark had mentioned that to me when I met with him not too long ago, and, you know, I mean, I'm open to like any kind of art and any kind of improvement, but my question would just be who is funding that
Right.
and who is maintaining that, you know? So even just getting these lights to be put up, and they haven't even been put up, has been a huge effort in trying to like wrangle people together and like to get collaboration, you know? But it's something to, you know,
are you guys planning on getting the lights up in the next month?
whenever someone can come and install them, then, you know, I'd kind of rather have a professional install them than me getting up there and doing it, because I don't know what I'm doing, you know?
You're gonna plug them in, all right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they'll be plugged in. But I think the electrician said that he could come and hang like wire that then we could scissor the lights to just like reinforce it. But I don't, you know, we're drilling into masonry, you know, so I was gonna see if he could purchase what is,
The tap.
you know, the best thing to do that.
Right, the anchors. Okay.
I'm looking at Steven because he probably knows how to do all of it.
Yes.
Like you would know exactly what to buy. Maybe I'll pick your brain later. I don't want to keep everyone here too long.
So the only time the city would come involved in the trash is the screening, right? So is that something that, on your other hat as a code enforcement officer, you're kind of taking the lead on in those two alleyways?
So we sent out mass notice of violation to every building owner on the community bank side, alerting them that if they did not address their trash in the next 7 days, we were just going to start immediately ticketing every building owner on that block. We've run into issues where they can't put dumpsters in the rear because the trucks can't access the dumpsters, and the companies will not put dumpsters back there. They also can't get around the, if they install screening in the rear on some of those buildings, the trucks can't get down the alley, so we were trying to figure that out.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So yeah, that's when the city gets involved. When we have issues with dumped garbage, which there used to be by your building, we did that
Yeah.
for about 2 years of,
Mhm. And that's under new management now. It's been a lot better.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. But that was, you know, $6,000 of code fees later, we finally got that under control.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah, so I mean, that's when we get involved.
Yeah.
But as far as like just where you put a dumpster, theoretically the screening, like with Chip's building where you have room to put it and you have a company that'll put a dumpster there, that side is much easier to kind of figure out. It's the other, the community bank side, where there hasn't been any interest in sharing any of that space to store dumpsters.
Right.
By
So-
community bank or by others?
So that alley in the back, the waste management companies are like, we will not put dumpsters like where Mags is. And they don't want anything screened back there because they can't get a truck through there.
Mhm.
So it becomes an issue where if we can't fit anything back there and we're having to run in with how to even kind of address that, there's been interest in maybe trying to find a consolidated point to put a dumpster that could be screened, but it's all private property, so we're kind of running into no one wants to hold the dumpster, basically.
Right, right.
Hmm.
I mean, I'd love to reach out to, I don't know who I would reach out to at Community Bank, maybe one of you could get me in contact with there. But I, you know, to maybe even just entertain the idea in that parking lot, you know?
And I believe they have screen dumpsters on their property, but the interest in sharing, to my knowledge, has been not there.
Yeah.
So that would be probably the first hurdle to get through on that side. I mean, it's okay to put lights going down, but by the time you get to that open courtyard area, you're into the trash. I mean, that's what we looked at when we kind of did that walkthrough, is when you're standing there looking, you're just looking at the backs of the building and they're all trash. So whether they, I mean, if they don't do a community trash area, then they're gonna have to start putting up screening material, right?
They can't.
They would have to either request a variance from the code, because they're like, we can't install screening because there's just not enough space. There's easement issues there where they all have easements to drive through. So it's kind of turned into like how do we figure out a way to make this work? Because the former Bombers, now Nags building, they're like, we cannot put a dumpster here. It's not gonna happen because the waste management company will not drop a dumpster there.
Right.
Which is why we end up with that line of trash cans,
Right.
which we then ran into with screening. Well, the waste management company is like, there's no effective way to really screen all that and still be able to access the cans. So now we're going back and forth on that. So we're trying to come up with a solution. The loose garbage issue is gonna be addressed just through ticketing
Right.
and removal fees like we did on your end of the alley.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, if people just kind of start being a little more mindful of keeping their trash cans clean, it's not the worst thing in the world to walk down an alleyway and see trash cans, like, kind of, you know, when you live in a city.
Eventually, we were talking about creating a space though, people were gonna sit.
I mean, yeah, I would love to see that happen, I just don't know, you know, at this point how it's feasible unless, like, everybody wants to come together downtown and they want to make that happen, like, the city can't go in and do it, you know, I mean, it's.
Because again, it's private property, so like you said, it's
Yeah.
like hurting everybody into the same.
Right,
same
and then if
time.
one person doesn't have that same interest in mind,
We have to do it the other way,
then,
harder way.
yeah,
Right.
you know, like, or, I mean, you could get everybody except like two building owners together and be like, we wanna transform the alleyway. If someone's like, well, I don't really care and I just wanna keep my dirty dumpster back here, then what are you gonna do, you
Yeah, too
know?
far away.
Yeah, so.
So Steve, do you see a light at the end of the tunnel on this trash stuff?
Yeah, I think we just hammer people with tickets and fines until they comply. Which is why we sent a letter and a follow-up email to all of the building owners saying, you will either comply or you will be hammered into complying. Which is what we did on your end of the alley, and it worked after a while.
Yeah,
What was that, just tenants?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, tenants, just businesses, a lot of people. It was a combined effort.
Mhm.
Wayne's parking lot.
14 to 18 days.
It's the side one. It's got a couple parking spots in the back.
That's only a couple buildings up from the alley, right?
Oh, it's like an elevation change to get up there.
To communities.
Well, yeah, to Deed Street.
I was
Yeah.
talking about a building on Deed Street.
I mean, I think the best route is convincing those business owners to come up with a mutual,
Right.
because I think there's places you could locate dumpsters, I think there's ways you could get around some of the issues, it's just, because it's all private property, it's difficult unless everyone's kind of willing to work, because
Right,
there are places back there is a dumpster back there. Like you said, it's a dirty dumpster, and
Yeah.
part of the problem is it's not being maintained by the building owner, so.
that's like kind of where that needs to come in.
Where, in theory, that area could house additional dumpsters and could be screened, but it's private property.
But maybe it might be available for rent. By the combined businesses could
Right.
rent a few parking spots and screen it and put a dumpster, but.
Right,
to
that's what I'm
have a
saying,
willing
you have to get those
Property owner
groups
to do
together to
that.
kind of negotiate that.
Yeah.
Right, you know, and getting anyone to spend money is a very difficult thing to do. I'm hoping
Well,
though
they
that,
either do that or they'll be paying
Hammer.
fees,
right,
Yeah.
so it might be cheaper to do
mhm,
that.
yeah, so,
We encourage
Has that ever been suggested, Judy? That's actually a nice idea.
Well,
Do you-
we had actually met with the bombers people, back in the day and had a conversation with, the bank, and that didn't go very far, but, yeah, so it's been mentioned, but not to these other building owners. I mean, one of the biggest buildings there at the time that we had talked to bombers folks, the building was owned by a property owner that had no interest in doing anything, and they owned 3/4 of the alleyway, or the building in the alleyway. The ownership of the alleyway is always up for question, who actually owns which piece, but, you know, so that didn't go very far. On the other side, we had, you know, Chip Klugo, who handled it himself for a large chunk of that alley,
because he owns it.
because he owns it. Yeah,
Right.
so, no, that was gonna be, some of that discussion was gonna be part of my process with the New York Main Street grant, you know, and getting some of these issues resolved, but for me, that's kinda, it's been tabled, because I can't do anything really until I know how much money I have coming off the DRI Downtown Improvement Fund to work with some conceptual planning, and also, you know, one of the big buildings is just not moving forward, so we need that in the mix.
Right.
Well,
So-
we've talked to people at NAGS, and they're the ones that vocalize the concern about the garbage cans, because we said you can't just have a line of garbage cans, and that's where we ran into our waste hauler won't deliver a dumpster, the alley width isn't there for the screening, we
Right.
talked to them about, well, have we discussed, or have you talked to your neighboring businesses? None of them are interested. So we've kind of we've been running around down there trying to figure out a constructive, creative way to deal with that.
right,
So
we also-
behind Nags, who actually owns the alleyway? Like, if you just went right behind their building, who owns that?
I think they own
They-
it
yeah,
up
they
to the community bank's parking lot,
Well, up to that hill.
up to the hill, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the line is,
So if they could
need to be surveyed.
Come to an agreement with community bank saying, hey, we're willing to put a screened in at your elevation, so then the waste haulers can come in at that elevation, because I'm assuming they can come down, it's much larger, that
mhm,
area, they could actually pick up the dumpster then.
Well, that was the concept,
Yeah.
but it wasn't agreed on.
right,
And that was a few years ago, it was before COVID, so before 2020. I'm not sure exactly when, but, you know, certainly discussion can happen again, and it might be more well-received from the building owners than from the city,
right, you know,
because
and
that's
I,
always a different
yeah,
perception.
so I mean, I feel like, I don't know, I'm hoping that once these lights go up, it'll feel like a little more inspiring to people to want to like make that space a little less dirty. And, you know, I mean, I'm happy to like try and coordinate a meeting with all of the downtown people to like discuss it, you know?
Well,
But
I
it's
think
not
you're right,
really.
though, let the lights go up first, start getting that
Mm-hmm,
better feeling, better vibe, and then from there, just keep chipping away at it.
definitely.
But when you get ready to do, I mean, when the lights are up, give it some time, some breathing room, and then start asking the other property owners. 'Cause that's a really good idea, if they could rent or lease from community bank a parking spot, just so that the
Yeah,
waste hauler could come in, pick it up.
I'm actually thinking of different property owners than them, but you could certainly check it out.
I mean, there's an
When
adjacent,
I mentioned it, I wasn't thinking of them because we've already talked to them, but
the
that
Tokyo
doesn't mean
Tavern
we can't
building.
again.
The Tokyo Tavern building next door, has
Right.
a dumpster. That would be a place you could theoretically clean up,
Right.
set up to have more than one dumpster.
Mhm.
But
you
it's
just have to come off the community bank though, right?
No, they just come straight down the alley like they do now.
Right,
There's room at some of the adjacent properties, it's just getting all those properties to work together to consolidate their waste removal,
Okay.
right,
which is not easy.
it's not easy.
Well, when we look back there too, I don't know exactly where the lot lines end towards the community bank's parking lot. But there's a bank, a green
Mm-hmm.
grass bank there, and we had looked at it and we don't, there's no surveys and we don't know the exact location of the property line, but it looked like if the property line went back far enough towards the parking lot, it's possible you could carve out that bank,
Mm-hmm.
put a retaining wall in,
Mm-hmm.
and put either seating back there or, maybe some of these spots for dumpsters or whatever, but that's gonna depend on where the property lines are and what's allowed. But it was, it's a thought that might be able to be reconfigured back there, but again, that's more expense on property owners to do that.
Okay. Well, I think we'll move on to topic B.
Yeah.
And this was our opportunity to hear from Jenny, her perspective of holding on to properties that are deficient in paying their property taxes.
Well, my first question to you on this topic is, what is the committee's goal on this topic?
So it's been my observation that the county makes us whole on the taxes for the 3 years, and then at the end of the 3 years, it's put in the parcel or the property, the structure is put in for an auction, and the county is made whole and then some. I was sharing with Emily before the meeting started that after this, I wanted to get a hold of our county treasurer and ask him approximately or definitively the properties that went out for taxes in the city of Oneonta in the last couple of years. I know 20 and 21, I don't think they did auctions. So we would only get this year and then prior to COVID, what was the trend? How many properties, what were the properties, we were made whole, probably, you and I, we talked about this, maybe in around $6,000 for a residential property, and then the county sold it, and what did they make off of that? I think the one that really opened my eyes was right on Chestnut Street down by Nick's Diner. There was a vacant lot that the owners stopped making payments on. And I think the property actually went for like 6,000 plus.
Okay, so basically your goal is you want to be able to make it a profit by auctioning off properties for a tax sale. Okay, so I personally, with the tax enforcement being at the county level, I personally think the city is better off by not doing tax enforcement for a number of reasons. One, we're made whole on our whole levy.
Mm-hmm.
So 100% of our tax levy is collected in cash. Not only are we made on our whole levy, but we're also made whole on our re-levies, which are the unpaid water and sewer bills and also all the unpaid code enforcement bills. So in December, the county is actually paying us usually a little over $300,000, between $300,000 and $400,000 in re-levies. They then take possession of those, and that also goes towards what they've got invested in the property. And tax enforcement is an incredible amount of work, and it's very time consuming. So if we were to do tax enforcement like we used to do, we wouldn't be made whole on our tax levy itself. We would have remaining properties. Then we would also probably have to then take hold of the school on top of the city property, because right now the county does all that. And so I think that the setup that we have right now is really the best for the city as a whole, as far as cash flow, as far as labor and tax enforcement itself. And then the amount of money, we've got a number of, those 90 parcels that you see that city owned, a handful of them, I want to say maybe a dozen of them, we acquired through tax sale, and we weren't able to auction them because they didn't want to combine them with their property, and they were not interested in taking them over for any reason. So sometimes when we take something for tax sale, especially vacant land, we usually have it forever. You know, so we've had some of those parcels now for decades, because there's no interested party that wants to take them over. So if we were to do what we talked about with a hybrid, we can actually bid on the property when it goes up for tax sale, if the city wants to take it and then sell it. But then you would have to figure out who's going to manage the property, who's going to do the selling, who's going to do the scope of work for however we want the property improved. So we have to consider all of those aspects. That's kind of what the land bank is doing for the city now. They're going either getting permission from the county to take them over before the sale, and then they will sell them with a scope of work that's placed right into the deed.
So can you take a pause right there?
Mhm.
On the land bank, how do they get to take over a property when the county has money out on that property?
I'm assuming, and I don't wanna speak, you may know better, but they actually have a, agreement with the county. So I don't know if they're paying the county.
They're not, the county just agrees to basically eat the cost.
With fees and.
So then, that thought process with an LDC, we could actually look at locations that we're interested in that have the ability to be developed and come to some kind of arrangement with the county. If we kept the current system, if the land bank is getting to do this, then why can't we do this?
Well, in my viewpoint, and I'll let Judy and Stephen speak on it, but the land bank has the staff to handle the transaction and follow through on the transaction once they get possession of the property, where the city currently does not have the staff to be able to do that. That's the first thing that I would see. Second of all, when we made the deal with the county back in 2014, when Dick Miller was here, we had a developer already interested in these properties, and we already had the arrangement already made by having the developer in hand before we made the agreement with the county. So I think if we want to do that, our best thing is to have a developer already ready to be able to take it over from us. Also, the other thing is cash flow. So we were able to do that years ago because we had cash on hand that we could work with. And we were able to put in the initial investment of getting the properties from the county and then being able to, to sell them to Housing Visions. Right now, we would have to look to see where we would get that funding to be able to make those transactions happen. So,
Jane, could I just jump into?
Sure, absolutely.
I think, back to your question about why couldn't an LDC do that with the county and if the city do that with the county, that would have to be agreed upon or reviewed by the county attorney as well as our attorney too.
Yeah.
To answer that question.
And,
I think land banks also are statutorily guided in doing, authorized in doing this type of work. Like, that's why land banks exist.
Yeah, because I was a county legislator and we approved the land bank and that's how we get this authorization. So the county legislators approved it, and so that's how the land bank is surviving. Plus they get money from not only the sell, but from the state. They're infused with some money there, so that's how they're doing it. As for the staff, the last I knew, there was only a few of them in that office, if there was a few. I know they've changed hands a couple of times, but.
The land banks have other authorities from the state
yeah, I was gonna say there's other
that
state
LDCs and the city probably don't have, because their sole purpose is to tackle these problems of zombie properties and vacant properties. So they have additional authority than other agencies do.
But I can get from the county treasurer history on the city properties via tax sales for whatever he's able to.
Jenny, I don't want to add any more to your work. I'll call it. I don't want to add any more to your.
Okay, so, but outside of that, my suggestion would be if we see an opportunity that we think that we can get a developer interested in,
Mm-hmm.
that's when we communicate with the county, and the county would have to pass a resolution, the city would have to pass a resolution for the agreement. And that's kind of my, if you wanna call it the hybrid approach. I
So
would like,
instead of generally, you're looking for specific property that
yeah,
we're
yeah,
interested in.
I would do it by case basis,
Okay.
to see if there is something that we are interested in. And it's also something that we could, if we saw something that was interested in, we could also tell the land bank, and correct, Stephen, if it was something that we thought would benefit the,
I mean, it's gonna just depend on how we would wanna do it. I mean, the land bank's interested in selling properties with scope, which is specific. You will follow the zoning code, it's gonna be a single-family home or whatever, it meets the zoning code. This is the type of work that's gonna be done, you have 2 years to do it. If you fail to do it, the land bank's gonna claw it back. Like, there's a very specific, so the city, if they wanted to mirror that process, could.
Mm.
In the past, I know that we have properties that exist right now today that we did that with, that are currently not in compliance with anything, and we've never clawed them back. So we've gone this route before and not succeeded. So,
Can you share those addresses with me?
so one of them's 38 Cedar. We have a clawback for that property. It's in the deed.
Okay. I'll go look at it. Is that the only one?
That's one that I know off the top of my head that I've talked with Dave Merzick about, that specifically has it in the deed as a clawback.
Because the city, okay.
I think 50 Elm Street also does, but the land bank took that property.
When did
So-
they get possession of it?
That was one that was put in the last tax auction.
but because we are made whole not only on the tax bill, but on any outstanding utility bill and code enforcement bill, I think the city is far better off by having that cash in hand than it would be from a tax sale.
Okay. I hear what you're saying from your desk, looking across, you know that you're always gonna be made whole.
Yeah.
Got that. Okay.
And like I said, if we see an opportunity, say for example, I'm just gonna pick Stella Luna, right? That's a very marketable area, and if something happened there and we wanted to get involved, not saying that that would ever happen at Stella Luna, but I'm just saying that's a prime property.
Thank you for clarifying.
You know, that's a prime property that we may be interested in, you
Right.
know, or,
We could potentially be interested.
but, yeah.
Do you have a list of properties that are on their third year?
No, that's all done by the county. Once we turn all unpaid taxes over as of May 1st, and we're
That's
never, and we're never updated as far as, except we will get notices when something is going to go for tax sale. The county will let us know.
We also, if we have specific properties that have code issues or that are incurring like massive fees, we will contact the county and ask what their tax situation is. So we sometimes will track, like if we have repeat, I wanna call them repeat offenders, but repeat, you know, vacant, non-compliant, we'll track that in the county as well.
I know before 2020, before they didn't have the auctions, I was keeping track of the tax sales for the land bank, 'cause I was on the board at that time. And we only had a handful, 5, 6 maybe, a year that went on
That's the
tax sale.
average,
Yeah, there weren't many.
5,
And I think we looked up this year's was
5,
3.
5.
2 were pulled for the land bank prior to the auction, and then there were 3 on the auction. So there's not a lot that you're looking at each year.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing, but it's not like this is gonna be super lucrative, you know, with a number of projects. I would worry about the sale price, because if you're selling a property that you've taken off the tax auction and you're selling it with scope, I think that, but in the land bank, we've seen this, people bid on those dirt cheap pricing because there's a scope involved, because they've got that other investment. So, the land bank hasn't made a lot of money on those projects. But the, you know, the benefit is you're getting it back on the taxes, and they're getting a cut of the taxes for a few years and stuff. But I don't know how lucrative it would actually be.
Question? Thank you, Jenny, for
Yeah.
telling us your
thanks.
perspective.
You're welcome, yeah, and, you know, if you have more questions, or if you want me to gather more information, just let me know.
Okay.
But I really think if you approach it, you know,
Case by case.
case by case or opportunity by opportunity, that would be a better approach.
Okay.
So it might be worth, you know, reaching out to the county and,
Mm.
and getting a list and then looking at them and seeing, and I don't know, see if we can negotiate something with them.
Well, and also, when I get the notifications from the county that the properties are going up for sale, I can just share it with the council.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And just, I wanna go back up in history just a little bit. When we did do tax enforcement here, quite often, we made very little profit, or would actually, realize a loss on our investment, because when they went out to tax sale, the bids were just so low.
Right. Did we use the same company that the county?
Oh geez, I don't remember.
Yeah, I
'Cause
think it's changed.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
This company seems to be very aggressive. They get out there, do a lot of marketing. But yeah, okay. So Emily, we're scheduled for December 19th for our next meeting. And if there's nothing else, I'll call us adjourned.
Yeah, I guess we should figure out what we wanna put on our next agenda. So, we can talk.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you
Thank you,
guys for
staff, for
coming.
coming in. Appreciate it.